Chapter 2. The princess was immediately taken to the palace doctor as she was trembling and incessantly vomiting. While the princess was being examined by the doctor, Freya immediately went to Queen Sasa. Your Majesty, I would like to inform you that Princess Purity was taken to the palace doctor because she suddenly vomited while eating and she lost consciousness. Freya shuddered nervously as she exclaimed to Queen Sasa the bad news. What? The king needs to know this. You can leave now. Queen Sasa's whole body went numb and she seemed to have been drenched in cold water due to the bad news. Queen Sasa rang the buzzer and immediately her assistants arrived carrying the big umbrella and they quickly ran to the king. She caught up the king with Queen Cleopatra massaging his arms. Your Majesty, I want to let you know that Princess Purity was taken to the palace doctor because as she was eating, she suddenly vomited and lost consciousness. The queen sighed as she exclaimed to the king the bad incident. What? Nothing bad must happen to the princess, the king said worriedly. He suddenly stood up and gasped because of what Queen Sasa had announced. Queen Cleopatra, please tell my assistant to prepare my chariot so that the queen and I can go to the princess immediately. The king took his sharp sword and placed it on his right waist while anxious at what he heard. Your Majesty, sorry to hear this bad news, said Queen Cleopatra as she hurried out to immediately order the assistants to prepare the king's chariot. The king and Queen Sasa quickly boarded the chariot and rushed to the palace hospital. They saw Princess Purity lethargic and unconscious. What happened to my princess? The king asked while holding back his anger when he saw the pitiful condition of the princess. Your Majesty, the princess was poisoned. It affected her so badly. The poison she ate was deadly. She needed the kind of herb plant that can only be found in the desert to cure her. The medicine needs to be obtained as quickly as possible, the palace doctor answered while examining the princess's mouth and wrist. Princess Purity, my princess, who did this to you? Said the queen weeping while hugging the princess. The king gathered together his soldiers and granted all the fastest horses to them. He ordered them to go to the desert to pick up the herb which can cure the poison and had to get it as quickly as possible, and whoever was the first to bring the said herb will be rewarded. Whoever put poison in the princess's food must be held accountable, said the king as he took his sword and struck it on the edge of the table in anger. Your Majesty, we need to investigate this because the life of our princess was in danger, Queen Sasa said worriedly while embracing the languid princess. The king ordered his assistant to summon all the people in the palace to have an immediate gathering to investigate and determine who had poisoned the princess. In just a few minutes, all the staff in the palace had gathered. I called everyone today because I wanted to know who cooked the princess breakfast that caused her dizziness. The king gritted his teeth and his eyes seemed to burn with rage. Your Majesty, I cooked the princess breakfast but I don't know what happened to her, because I both cooked your breakfast, for the two queens and Princess Vanya. I wonder why she was poisoned because I prepared and cooked the same food. Maybe someone put poison in her food intentionally, Haida said sincerely as he bowed his head. I need to know who brought the princess food towards her, said the king with his eyes full of anger. His hands trembled as he held his sword to his right waist. Your Majesty, I am the one who brought the princess's food but I don't know anything about the said poison. I'm telling the truth, Sonia said while bowing her head. You were the last to touch the food, so you are responsible for its safety. Are you the one who put the deadly poison on her food? The king yelled as he stretched out his right hand to slap the slave. Your Majesty, I know nothing and I am innocent. The slave turned pale and trembled as she answered the king's inquiries against what had happened to the princess. Arrest and imprison her, said the king in a loud voice pointing his finger to the slave. People were screaming around them and others couldn't believe that Sonia could do that to the princess. Your Majesty, my conscience is clean, said the slave as she knelt down. Sonia begged, but the king did not believe her. You will taste my wrath. Prepare yourself tomorrow, because you will definitely not be able to withstand the punishment that I will impose you. The king's tone blazed with anger. His hands trembled as he restrained himself from killing the slave. Suddenly a soldier arrived. Your Majesty, I have brought the herb that will help to cure the poison, the soldier said happily while waving the herb. The soldier immediately jumped from his white horse to give the said herb to the king. Just pray that the princess is cured with this herb, otherwise I will bury you alive. The king shot Sonia a sharp stare as he held the herb in his left hand. The king proposed to imprison the slave, and he immediately went to the princess to give her the herbal medicine for her fast recovery. Two soldiers approached Sonia. Where will you take me? Release me, because I am not guilty of poisoning the princess. Sonia struggled, but the soldiers held her shoulders tightly. Her ragged brown top was torn as she pulled her body several times to escape, but the soldiers didn't budge and tightened their grip on her even more. Sonia heard the screams of the palace staff. Some took pity on her and others judged her. The soldiers dragged her towards the jail and pushed her while tightly locking the door. Sonia's POV. Sonia was born and raised in the kingdom of Zhuan. Her parents were slaves of the palace, and at the age of 28, her father died due to the punishment imposed on him. As she experienced, her father was also accused of a crime that he did not commit. Princess Purity was 6 years old then, and she drowned in the man-made lake because someone pushed her, and her father was the pointed suspect in the incident. Her father was punished by the king, and the flaming sword was dipped into his body until it was raging and he could no longer bear it. Sonia and her mother could do nothing but cry as they watched the cruel punishment imposed on her father. The princess was immediately healed by the said herbal medicine. The king and queen was so grateful, so the king summoned all the staff in the palace so that everyone could witness the punishment to be inflicted to the person who poisoned the princess, and would serve as a lesson to all who sought to threaten the life of the princess. Sonia, tonight you will be punished, and I hope that you can cope with this punishment, said her mother sadly while visiting in jail. Sonia's mother put her hands on the railing to hug her daughter. Please pray for me. I don't know why I was accused. I didn't do anything bad to the princess, Sonia said as tears trickled down her cheeks. Sonia, why did this happen to us? Said her mother while sobbing. Mother, I'm afraid I might be like my father who died because he couldn't stand the punishment imposed to him, she said, trembling with nervousness while holding her mother's hands. I can't bear to see you tortured. I find it hard to see you in such a situation because it reminded me of the bitter fate of your father, her mother said worriedly as abundant tears gradually trickled down her eyes. A few minutes later the soldiers came. I'm sorry, the king has ordered us to take Sonia, said the soldier in a loud voice. Mother, I didn't do anything wrong. Sonia's voice rasped and she could barely pronounce her word correctly due to the trembling of her lips. Where will you take my daughter? Have mercy on her. Please let her go, said her mother as she cried and could hardly breathe. Mother, mother, help me, she said with a hint of nervousness in her voice. I have nothing more to do but pray for you. Tears flowed in her mother's eyes as she knelt down. The soldiers took Sonia away. Sonia's mother was left in tears as she removed her white apron to wipe her face, which was soaked with sweat and dripping tears. Your Majesty, the culprit is here. The soldier sneered as he pushed Sonia, causing her to fall to the ground. Take her to the front of the palace and tie her hands behind her back. Dip her face into the ground and take the whip and beat her. The king commanded as he slammed his sharp sword into his side. The soldier took the whip and hit her once. Arg! Sonia moaned. Why did you poison the princess? The king asked angrily. He grabbed Sonia's bound hands and pushed her hard towards a soldier holding a whip. I didn't do anything wrong, Sonia cried as she felt a slight dizziness. Strike her, the king ordered rudely. King Zupir motioned the soldier to whip the slave even harder. Arg! 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 Ouch! Sonia squirmed in excruciating pain. The soldiers hit Sonia with the whip several times until her back bled and she was lethargic. Tell me who ordered you to poison the princess, or else I will burn you alive. The king's eyes rolled in anger. Your Majesty, I have no idea. I'm telling you the truth. Sonia bleated while dealing the pain of her body. Don't lie if you don't want to taste the brutality of my punishment. The king frowned in anger as he drew his sword, and the palace staff who witnessed the horrific punishment screamed in tension. Your Majesty, I am faithfully serving you and I cannot do what you have accused me of, Sonia said tearfully as she forced herself to stand up to bow her head to the king. The king was not convinced by Sonia's statement and became even more angry with her. Take her to the back of the palace and burn her alive. The king clenched his fists as he commanded his soldiers. The soldiers took firewood and layered them until it rose for about 5 meters high. They took Sonia and placed on top of it, tying her hands and feet into the firewood. The king ordered to light the bottom of the firewood until it was burning, and the fire gradually consumed the fuel, and Sonia began to feel the heat from underneath. She was shaking and screaming loudly. Help! 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 Have mercy on me! Sonia shouted in her hoarse voice. Mother! Mother! Please help me! Sonia's tone rasped as she screamed in fear. Please subscribe and like the video, and please put your comments below for more videos. Thank you very much.